Thank you all for coming tonight. I'd like to talk about now. You know, be here now. That's the whole goal of Zen, the whole goal of life, really, the whole goal of spirituality, if you really understand it. Be here now, I think, is the name of a book by Ram Dass, too. Or the Power of Now, right, by Eckhart Tolle, which many of you have read and all of you should read and absorb. You speak about the eternal now, and it sounds very New Agey, but it's very close to the truth of what both Zen and Christianity are looking for. Witness the definition of eternity. Popular notions, so that's what I thought when I was a kid, have, eternal life. We're always praying for eternal life in the Catholic liturgy, and we don't even know what we're talking about, because sometimes we think, well, as I say, I thought when I was younger, eternity is just a real long time. It's basically the same sequence of time and consciousness that we have now, except we're up in heaven and it just never ends. It's a really long time. But that's nonsense. That's not at all what we mean by eternity. And luckily, because that doesn't sound very appealing if you really think about it. Eternity, the definition, the most famous and lasting definition, most accurate definition of eternity was given by a 6th century Catholic Christian philosopher called Boethius. The definition used later by St. Thomas Aquinas to describe and talk about God's eternity in this Summa Theologica. It's eternity is tota simul et perfecta possessio et interminabilis vitae. Boethius wrote in Latin. And what that means is total, simultaneous, perfect possession of infinite life, interminable life. Total, simultaneous, perfect possession of life, infinite life. So the whole point of eternity is that it's all at once. It's full and perfect right here and now. So that's where you get the eternal now. It's not a sequence of time. It's not a sequence of anything. God is eternal because God is totally present. Total life. At the same time. Perfect possession of life. That's what eternity is. And that's what we're called to share. That's what eternal life is. So that's why we have to become divinized, transformed into God, transformed into Christ, using Christian language, to participate, to share eternal life. We get quite the same approach, quite the same fundamental experience and understanding in Zen. And I'm just going to quote two koans that have to do with time, actually time and space. Notice, total perfect possession of life means there's no time and there's no space either. God is everywhere, nowhere. And modern science, Einstein, time and space are the same thing, they all are interrelated. It's basically a dimension of reality in which things are separated out, extended, space-time extension, that disappears, that's swallowed up in eternity. So if you're talking about time and space, it's the same thing. So the very famous last koan in the Mamonkan has to do with this, and I quoted it before. It's called Kempo's One Road. And the monk says to Kempo, there's one straight road to nirvana, one straight road to eternal life, one straight road to what it's really all about. And I still wonder where that road can be. And Kempo lifted his staff, drew a line, and said, here it is. There's no road here, road up the mountain, road up to heaven, it's here, right here, right now. That's it. There's no space. And there's no place to go. It's just right here and now. Now, not the way most people live here and now. As I say, most people are just fussing away in their minds and their feelings, and they're not living the total, perfect simultaneous possession of life, infinite life at all. But if you really are here, and you really are now, then you do. That's why this is the road to nirvana, to eternal life. This is the way. Christ is right here now. I'll come back to that in a second. But the other koan is, I've only heard this commented on by a teacher once, but it's a delightful koan, number 24 on the Blue Cliff record. And here you have Ryutetsuma. That's, it's a woman master. You don't find many of these in the stories, but you should. Her name means an iron mill. Ryutetsuma, the old cow, the old female buffalo. And she's called an iron mill because, she crushes her opponents in the Dharma battles. Okay. So here she comes, setting her trap. She comes to Isan, the monk, and he says to her, "Oh, old cow, so you've come." Affectionate put-downs, that's the way the masters work. So she says, she baits him, "So, tomorrow there's a great festival at Taisan. Will you be going?" Sounds innocent enough, right? But it's a trap. Why? Well, because Taisan is what? 500 miles away? So, at least a few hundred miles apart. So, what's Isan going to do? He doesn't say something asinine like, "What do you mean? That's 100 miles away. How can I be going to the festival?" No. What he does, because he recognizes the trap, he lies down and stretches himself out. Didn't say a thing. And she recognizes that he got the better of her, so she walks away. But how did he get the better of her? What was the trap? The trap was, you don't have to go anywhere, follow any road, go 100 miles away or 5 yards away or anyway. It's all right here. So why should you even bother going to the festival, no matter how far away it is? Or you can say it differently. The festival's right here. Space and time are an illusion, so everything that the festival has 500 miles away, you have right here and now, if you're awake to it. Which is why he just stretches out in perfect delight right there where he is, to express perfect contentment with here and now. But you have to wake up to it. And by the way, this complete suppression of space and time, where everything becomes fully alive and fully light and fully conscious. That's why Zen points out that karma vanishes when you're enlightened. Why? Because it's the total perfect possession of infinite life. Everything is resolved. Everything is resolved from all your past lives or your present life or however you want to imagine it. All that's resolved. Very similar to what Catholic theologians like Karl Rahner postulated or suggested was what happens, what purgatory might be. He said purgatory might be this one huge illumination right when you die. It takes care of everything. Well, exactly. Perfectly possible. That's exactly what Zen is saying. Because all I have to do is wake up to this perfect life, and it's right there. Everything is taken care of. Now, the different dimensions of this, the way it can be described or the way it can be lived out or approached. For example, this perfect possession of light is not monism. It's not just like some big, you just vanish inside this uniformity. The Trinity is proof of that. And the vitality, it's life after all. It's exchange, it's movement, but in an infinite level. So that's why many traditions, as I said in my lectures last week, speak of it in terms of a marriage feast, where you're perfectly at one with ultimate reality, not dissolved into it exactly, but you're not separate anymore. It's like a marriage. One flesh, or as St. Paul says, whoever united to the Lord is one spirit with him. So it's a unity. It's a union with ultimate reality. It's one way you can live it, one way you can experience it. Because it's not a monism. So it's an important dimension you can't lose here. And this is the great parable of the virgins, the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins who kept their lamps lit, the lamps of consciousness and awareness, so that the bridegroom, the fullness of the present moment, of the absolute of nirvana, when it arrives at midnight in the pure darkness of everything else, you're ready to enter the wedding feast. That's what we're talking about. Eckhart Tolle uses that very parable in his book, as you may know if you've read it. One of the best commentaries on the gospel parable that I read anywhere, and it's not even by a Christian. Just by someone who's awake. So that's one dimension of it. The other thing is, it's, everything is impermanent when we actually live time moment by moment by moment by moment. If that means, in our dimension, as we actually live it in this dimension, then you have to fully live each second, but don't hold on to it. Don't hold on to it. And that's where the non-clinging and you don't make a judgment about it, you just open yourself up to whatever the moment brings. Moment by moment by moment, you don't hold on to it. Partly because you can't, that's where the suffering comes from, as the Buddha says in the Four Noble Truths, you're trying to cling and hold on to something that's not clingable, it's passive. Everything is changing and impermanent as we live it. So you don't hold on to it. St. Augustine, whose feast day is today, has a beautiful image of this. He says, the universe is like a symphony, or he says like a melody. And each being and each moment is a note. In order for music to work, he says, you can't hold on to a note beyond its value, right? Can you imagine if a musician in an orchestra said, I like that note and I'm going to hold on to it, I don't care how long. Well, the symphony would be finished. That's what Augustine says that. So stop holding on to your note. Whether it's a note of your life or your life as a note, either way, you've got to let it pass. And that's where the great symphony comes, the great beauty of the dance of creation, whatever image you want to use. The passing, it's a melody, it's a symphony. And that's where you can bring in the whole image of dying, as we talked about last week, recently, the great death, the deaths we have to die. This is where the passion resurrection motif comes in. You got to die to each moment and die in each moment, so that you can rise to each moment and rise in each moment. Another way of living it. Another expression of how the challenge is actually lived is its actual death each moment. And it's not a death simply because, it's not a simple death simply because you can't cling to it, you've got to let each note come. It's because you're actually transformed and you grow in depth of consciousness, or should grow in depth of consciousness, through and at each moment, so that the next moment you're even more awake, more alive, closer to that full and perfect simultaneous possession of infinite life. So it's a whole death and resurrection thing going on each time as you grow and are transformed into the beloved in the wedding feast, etc. Back to that image again. And perfectly united to one another, to everything. As Zen always says, there's just one body. Christianity says the same. There's just one body. It's all one reality, and so we're all connected. It's not a monism. This is where you're united to the ultimate reality. That ultimate reality is in and as everyone else, and so we're perfectly united to everything and everyone else too. That requires the death and the rising in order to do that. To die to your old self, rise to your complete self, which is everybody, the whole self, Christ's self, the Buddha nature. So that's yet another dimension of it. And finally, I think the most profound dimension of it, to speak about this death and rising and this circle of life, this dance of life, is the main reason you can't cling, and the main dimension of how you die and rise at each moment, is because that is the character of ultimate reality. Buddhism calls it emptiness or compassion. We call it the Trinity. It's this total, complete emptying at each second. The whole universe does this. Black holes, stars and galaxies. It's a complete, and that is the nature of infinite life. That's what infinite life is. It's not, oh, I'm holding on to infinite life and I'm enjoying it. Infinite life is giving of infinite life, pouring it out in each second. That's what the Trinity is, that's what the universe is, that's what Zen is, so that you're not holding on to anything, because the ultimate character of life is this complete giving, this dying and rising in each moment. This gift to one another as you're united to one another. The gift of the Absolute to you, the gift of yourself to the Absolute, which is just one gift, one flow of the Absolute in itself. One Christ loving himself, as St. Augustine said once again. So, wow. It's pretty interesting. All those dimensions. And I close with a phrase that's used both in our Christian tradition and in the Zen tradition. I came across it recently in the Zen tradition. My beginning is my end, and my end is my beginning. The beginning, the end, it's all one reality. And it's all one whole thing. The whole sequence is now. All of time and space is right here and now, as the great mystics say in all the traditions, if you wake up to that. So my beginning is my end, and my end is my beginning. I remember when I was younger, I came across that. That, believe it or not, in French, mon commencement et ma fin, et ma fin et mon commencement, was one of the first polyphonic compositions in Western music, back in the, 11th, 12th century. They put that verse to, a dance of notes, of fugue, polyphony, how the beginning is the end of the end of the beginning. It's all wonderful, wonderful stuff. Which is what Jesus says at the end of the Bible. The Alpha and the Omega. I'm the Alpha, the beginning and the end. And so are you. So are we. And it's all here and now, right here and now. If you just wake up. Stay awake, as Jesus says. Stay awake, as the Zen masters say. Stay awake.